Hi everybody, it's Tammy. We're back for week 2 of our climate action theme, the food you eat. So last week we did a wild rice and mushroom soup, so that was the soup. Now we're going to make some homemade crackers. And they just happen to be gluten-free, so there's a little bonus for some people who are not able to eat a lot of gluten. So what I'm going to start with, and this is going to be a really quick recipe, it doesn't have a lot of ingredients in it. I'm starting with 1 cup of ground almonds, or almond flour it's sometimes called. And this is going to be a half recipe this week. I'll put the full recipe online and post that later on. In the video, always check the comments because I always put the recipe in the comments as well if you're watching the video. So to this 1 cup of almond flour or ground almonds, I'm going to add, and this is where you can get creative, I'm going to add about a tablespoon of chia seeds, but you could use poppy seeds, you can maybe chop up some sunflower seeds, even some herbs really fine, like maybe some fresh rosemary, which goes really well with nuts. So that's up to you. You can make it your own. Also to this, I'm going to add 1 tablespoon of olive oil and 2 tablespoons of water. So we just add that into our bowl, and 2 tablespoons of water. So we're just going to make, this is just going to make sort of a soft dough. We're just going to bring it together with a spoon. And I don't know if you can see, but on my countertop I have a piece of parchment paper just waiting. And I also have my oven preheating to 325 degrees. The oven has to be a little bit lower because these crackers are nut-based. We don't want them cooking at high temperatures because nuts burn really easy. So we keep the temperature a bit lower at 325. So this is just kind of coming together, sort of like in a soft dough. You could do this inside a food processor, but I figure it's so easy and it comes together so fast. I don't want to dirty an entire machine just to like bring a little bit of dough together. So again, this recipe, you can do a half recipe of it, or you can do the double recipe, which I'm going to give to you. And so this one recipe will just be 1 pan. So I'm going to put my dough on my parchment paper once I've brought it all together. Okay. And you're going to need a rolling pin. If you don't have a rolling pin, maybe a soup can, something to roll it between. I'm going to bring my dough together and I'm going to just pat it out a little bit. My pan is square, so I'm going to kind of shape it in a bit of a triangle so that when I do go to put the other piece of parchment paper on top and start to roll it, that it sort of semi has the shape that I want. So if your pan is round, just sort of make more of a disc than a rectangle. It just helps out a little bit. So there's my second sheet. And the nice thing about the parchment paper is that one side you are going to use and keep the dough on and put it onto your pan. So we're going to, use that part up. So I'm just going to start to roll this out in between the 2 pieces. And the one thing with this recipe is you don't want to make the dough too thin. If you make it too thin, your crackers are going to burn in the oven. So maybe try to keep it about 1/4 inch thick. And if you find that your edges, because it tends to be when you're rolling things, the edges get very thin, start to really work on the center as you're rolling. So you're rolling out from the center out to the edges, and then that'll make your edges a little less thin. If by some chance though they go in, they're a bit thin, not to worry. Just check on your crackers before the time is up on them. And if the edges are getting brown, we're going to score this. You can just break them off, take them out of the oven with a little flipper, and then leave the center part if it's a touch thicker, and just let it go a few extra minutes in the oven to brown. So just getting this out, and you can always peek, so you just gently peel it back. Don't go too fast, and just see how it's feeling. Mine's still a little bit thick, so I'm gonna just, again, from the center out to the edges. There, that's perfect. Okay, so I will use that other piece of parchment paper for something else, like if I bake some cookies or whatever. It'll get used though. So then I'm going to take for a half recipe, all I need is a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. So I've got a little bit of pink Himalayan salt. I'm going to use a little bit of a fancier salt just because I'm making something a little special. It's homemade crackers, right? Now, specialty salts like sea salt and all these flavored salts like pink Himalayan and volcanic salts, all those different things, they have wonderful flavor, so they can add another dimension of flavor to your crackers. It's too rocky, right, in the big chunks, so I'm just taking my mortar and pestle and I'm just grinding it down so I have a fine salt, because I don't want chunks inside my crackers. Like, I don't want someone biting in and getting a big chunk of salt. So I already started to do this a little bit before I put the video on, so just a couple of more passes here. We'll get this ground down. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to sprinkle that 1/4 teaspoon over the top of my dough. I'm going to put my parchment paper back on the top, give it another quick little roll with the rolling pin just to like press that salt in. And then I'm going to put it onto my my baking sheet. My oven is already at the 325 and heated up. And like I said, you can make this recipe your own by adding whatever you want. Or if you don't want to add anything to it and you just want to make it plain, then you can certainly go ahead and just have plain crackers and not add anything to the batter at all. So that goes the lid. That one. Press it in just gently because I pretty much have it to the thickness that I want. And then I'm going to take my pizza cutter and I'm just going to score it. I'm not going to necessarily like cut right through, but I'm just going to lightly score it, the dough, just so that when after it bakes, it'll be very easy to just kind of break apart the cracker and have my little squares or rectangles, whatever it is you want. So onto my baking sheet. I'm just going to tuck in the edges so they don't burn. And if you have a convection oven, I would probably not do the convection setting. You don't really need to, because again, nuts do tend to burn and convection is a little bit warmer. So I would turn off your convection feature if you have that on your oven. And into the oven they go. And those don't take very long at all. Actually, I forgot to check the time on these, but I believe it's only 10 minutes. So 10 minutes to cook in the oven. They come out, I'll let them cool on a rack, and then I'll just break them off. Or I might even just go back over them with my pizza cutter on my pan, and voila, I've got homemade crackers. Fast, tasty, and easy. And the thing with the crackers is that those almonds, I had planned to use those ground almonds in another recipe and didn't get to them. So I was trying to use them up, and I guess that's sort of the idea, is not to have any food waste in the kitchen, or as little food waste as possible. And that's sort of our low carbon tip for this week, is to use up all those veggies and herbs and ingredients in your kitchen so that you're not tossing things into the garbage, because that is a huge waste of energy, right? All the energy that went into growing, picking, transporting, maybe refrigerating things that you might throw into the garbage, all that, the energy that went into the packaging, the labor, so there's pollution as well. So there's so many things that go along with food waste, and really it's one thing that we can do as individuals, is to try to lower our food waste. So I should just point out that I used a 100-gram package of ground nuts. That is about 1 cup. So that's half a recipe. But I also had a little bit of almonds inside my freezer that I had to use. They were older than even these ones. So now I've got some left over. So I just happened to be making an apple crisp this weekend. So what I'm going to do with this little bit of ground almonds that is left over, I'm going to throw it into my crisp topping, and I'm going to get rid of it that way. So I bump up the protein in that crisp, I bump up the flavor, and I don't generate any food waste. Anyways, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next Friday. Take care.